This is a chronological history of printed media by Steve, Andrew, and Jake.
The following are some key points and dates in early print media history. While printing first started in Europe with Johannes Gutenberg's press, the first occurrence of printing in the United States was in 1478, where printing began at Oxford University. In 1584, the University Press at Cambridge begins operation. In 1690, Public Occurrences was printed in Boston. The first paper mill was in operation in 1691. Poor Richard's Almanac, written by Benjamin Franklin, was released in 1733. A Dictionary of the English Language by Samuel Johnson was released in 1755. In 1810, The History of Printing in America by Isaiah Thomas was released. Louis Braille invented reading for the blind in 1829. An improved printing press called a rotary printing press came out in 1846, and it could print around curved items such as cylinders. And in 1902, the first air conditioner was actually invented when Willis Carrier was trying to make a dehumidifier for a New York printer. During the 1850s, there were giant presses that could produce 10,000 complete papers per hour.
The Civil War had a large effect on journalism in many ways. War photography showed detail from the battlefield that stories just couldn't. It showed graphic images that no one would have seen beforehand. By using the telegraph, journalists had a new way to get information out during the war. It led to more concise stories because the longer the telegraph, the more expensive it was to produce. The inverted pyramid also came out of this. This method of news writing was key to sending that concise information through telegrams. The most important information, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, was listed first because it held the key details so that a response or decision about the article could be made quicker.
Two of the most famous people in journalism history were Joseph Pulitzer and William Hearst. Pulitzer created sports and women's pages for the newspaper. He introduced banner headlines and pictures for the front page. The Pulitzer Prize was named after him. William Hearst was the son of a millionaire, took over the San Francisco Examiner, and soon realized that the California news market wasn't big enough for him, so he moved to New York. He then bought the New York Journal. Yellow journalism was a type of newspaper reporting that pushed exciting stories over factual ones. It came out of a popular cartoon strip called Hogan's Alley, drawn by Richard Outcault, and it was published in Pulitzer's New York World. The main character eventually became known as the Yellow Kid. In 1896, Hearst hired Outcault away from Pulitzer, and the war began. The USS Maine exploded in 1898 in Cuba, and both Hearst and Pulitzer's newspapers ran a story about an enemy blowing it up, but actually a mine caused the explosion. This was a large factor that started the Spanish-American War.
Right around the turn of the century, the distribution of pictures became an integral part in printed media. The first piece of technology that allowed the transfer of pictures through the wire was the telediagraph in 1895. It sent shellac-on-foil originals but was unsuccessful due to high costs and poor picture quality. In 1913, Swiss photographer Eduard Belin improved on the design, creating the Belinograph. His machine used pre-existing phone lines to send photocell copies of images, and this practice eventually grew into the company AT&T. Around the start of World War II, syndication of media emerged. Broadcast syndication means that an individual station will buy programs outside of its own network. This made it possible for text and images to be sent all over the world between companies, drastically increasing the amount of coverage a print company could ascertain. This means pictures taken during D-Day could end up in France, Germany, England, and the US within a matter of days. Syndication of companies also allowed for comic strips, advice and opinion columns, and editorials to spring up in print media. With the mass production of newspapers and high demand, companies turned to local youth to distribute their product. Paperboys became a poster child position for young Americans who wanted to make money. Studies have even shown that people who were paperboys in their youth were more likely to be successful in life because a work ethic was instilled at such a young age. With the popularization of radio in the late 20s, and later television in the 50s, the newspaper began its long, slow decline. More information could be spread faster, creating an appealing alternative to reading through pages for your news.
Now we want to get into what news has turned into in today's world. Newspapers are beginning to become a thing of the past, and all media is starting to be consumed online. CompuServe was the first use of surfing the web in the 1970s. 40 years later, we are surfing the web for almost all of our news content. In about 2010, the media started to see a major switch from where the news content was being read at 34% online and only 31% was being read through newspapers. This was a major change for a world that had never really used online for the news content. The world today is revolving around technology and social media, and around the year 2012, social media started to have a bigger role in the way that we got our news. When using social media, Facebook was the biggest source to start with the sharing of news posts, and many people still use that form today. Roughly 64% of Americans get news from Facebook. The reason that we are seeing a change in where we get our news from today is because everyone can get to it through cell phones that have internet access in almost any time or place. It's simply more convenient to get, so why would people not just use the internet to get their news? It's also free on a lot of sites, so it beats paying for a newspaper or any other way you would get your news, such as through a magazine. The newspapers today have now had to make major adjustments by posting all of their content online, as well as their daily papers. Enough people still buy daily newspapers because some people simply prefer to read from the paper, but every major news company has continued to adjust to whatever is thrown at them to keep up and compete with everything else. MLive, the Detroit Free Press, and other major media sources have all been forced to post online daily for people to read their content while still posting daily newspapers. In the future, the news world will continue to have changes, and only time can really tell how long print press and newspapers will survive. What we do know is that the online news will continue and will be very competitive moving forward. I predict that the print press will eventually be moved to all online content, but for now at least it will still be used, until it is only people from future generations who will have no use for a newspaper. That will conclude this vidcast. For Jake, Andy, and Steve, we hope you enjoyed.